Welcome to Castaic Lake podcast. Today we have Greg Stotesbury. Is that correct?
Yeah, good morning.
Okay,
yeah.
I just want to make sure I said
No, you hit it right on the money.
Well, let me turn this up a little. All right. So I knew of you from Ben because I watched your guys' video back in the day.
You're reaching back a ways.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk on that. We could start on that, I guess, because before that, were you freshwater fishing at that time when you started doing calico?
Nick, I've been doing both all my life. I was lucky enough to grow up in the South Bay and third generation parents that were both water people. And my dad was an awesome waterman and a diver, surfer, fisherman, hunter. So as a kid, we had a garage full of surfboards and fishing rods and guns and all the stuff you like to grow up with. So it was, but to answer your question specifically, I've been fishing calico bass for many years and grew up in Redondo. So I was used to fishing them on party boats and then out of my own little tin boats and skiffs and everything else. And then it just kind of evolved from there. We looked up to guys like Jack Soule, who was, doing it way before Benny and I were.
Yeah.
And then, just started fishing Newport Bay a lot. I of course worked at AFTCO for many, many years and worked there for a few years before we hired Benny. And he and I would take our skiffs down to fish Newport Bay, and then we started venturing out to the mouth of the bay and then outside the mouth of the bay and started getting ruined on our light bay tackle. So we started using heavy and heavier gear, and it just progressed from there. But it was very grassroots. It wasn't like anybody was showing us or telling us what to do. We just used our instincts as primarily freshwater bass guys. And all of my saltwater calico bass fishing had been at the islands and at PV and, using a 540 and 40-pound test and a live herring or some kind of big bait. Yeah. And so when we progressed to the plastic side, it was fun. It was we were lucky. We had a lot of success, caught a lot of big fish, but we by no means did we invent it, but it just kind of was in our blood from an early age.
And it seemed like when Ben was talking about it, you guys had it close by, like where you could get off work, jump in the boat and kind of launch down there.
Yeah, at that time, AFTCO's offices were right off Jamboree in Irvine. Okay. And I lived in Corona Del Mar at that point. I just got married and lived down there. So I kept my skiff at my house. And Benny lived relatively close. He lived in Irvine. So we both had boats. We both had tin boats. And, we'd fish Newport Bay and catch hundreds and hundreds of fish in there. And like I say, just started exploring a little farther and farther out of the harbor. Mm-hmm. And we were hooking all these big bass, mostly in the evenings, which was kind of prime time anyway.
Yeah.
And just getting licked on light tackle.
Yeah. Were you catching spotted bay bass at that time in the beginning?
Tons of them.
How big do you think they were back then? A lot bigger quality? Like, do you still go out and fish spotted bay bass?
I do. I still like fishing spotties. They're a ton of fun. I fish mostly in Huntington Harbor now. Okay. I have several boats, but the boat I fish mostly is a little restored 17 and a half Aquasport.
Which I want to talk about later.
Yeah, so a whole lot of stuff on boats.
I'm very interested on that one. Yeah.
But we do a lot of fishing now in Huntington Harbor. Yeah. And I think Newport was probably better than Huntington Harbor. Maybe I was just more focused on it back then. Now I'm kind of casual about it, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But, back then in Newport Harbor, we never caught a lot of giants. A 2-pounder would have been a real fat one for us. I did catch a 3 3/4 one time on a spinnerbait in there.
Wow.
Many, many years ago on a beetle spin.
Really?
So that'll tell you how long ago that was. But that was a super rare fish. Most of what we caught were the typical 11 to 14 inch stuff.
Yeah.
And but it was fun. Light line is great.
Yeah. So when you started venturing out of the harbor, did you already, like you said, were going out to the island fishing herring, live bait, stuff like that? You just said, well, let's come right outside, see what kind of fish are going to bite here. Did you know that there were calico there, or were you kind of like, we'll see what's going on?
Oh yeah, we knew there were big bass there, and I'd fished in Laguna and kind of all up and down there a lot. I don't know that Ben had done much of that until we started fishing together. Mm-hmm. But, we were the typical, use a mojo or a scampi, a root beer scampi and put a piece of squid on it and flip it into the rocks on fairly heavy gear and yank out a calico or a sand bass. So I'd done a lot of that. The thing that really kind of changed us was we were getting a lot of bites in Corona Del Mar and upper or kind of lower Newport or upper Laguna. But we were mostly using curltail grubs, using the same stuff we were using in the harbor. Back then, the mojo grub was the hot one. And then I think Mojo made a grub, and then we used a lot of stuff from Kalen's. And Al was a good friend, and God bless him and rest in peace. He was a great guy and helped us with a bunch of baits. But we started mostly using curltail stuff. I was pouring all my own lead heads. And then when my friendship with Dave Pfeiffer developed, who Dave and I both started in the tackle industry at the same time. He, of course, at Shimano and myself at AFTCO. Dave and I remember we fished on a Thanksgiving weekend and in the Shimano company Ranger bass boat. And he said, hey, let's go calico fishing. So we went down below San Clemente. And he said, hey, I've got all these swim baits here that we use. And I thought, yeah, I've heard of those before.
When you're saying San Clemente, you mean actual the city or the island?
The city.
Okay.
The city. So fishing down by the pier, outside Doheny and just all those rock piles and basically all the way down to Cotton's Point.
Okay.
And so when we started doing that, Fife pulls out this big bag of Worm Kings. And he says, do you know about Worm King? And I said, well, yeah, I've used them in fresh water a little bit. Just starting to dabble into the big swim bait thing back then. And he said, well, let's try some of these 5-inch Worm Kings. So we started using swim baits. And I think that trip, if I recall, we caught 74 bass that day.
How big were they, though?
They weren't giants.
Really?
We had fish from, 1.5 pounds to 5 pounds, but lots of them.
Yeah.
And so the light bulb kind of went on. And then I knew Marv Bendelin, who had Worm King, kind of knew him through the industry. And so we started talking directly to Marv, and he started pouring some custom colors for me. And then Benny and I both kind of got involved with it. Benny was more involved with Al Kalin at the time, and Al started pouring some swim baits for us. And the swim baits just kept getting bigger and bigger. I mean, we started using little 3 and 4 inch baits, and all of a sudden we're using 8 and 9 and 10 inch stuff, big hunks of rubber. And
which is so cool because that's kind of what people are doing now, but you did it 30 years ago,
yeah.
I mean, it hasn't changed much really, and that's what is so cool to hear from you say, yeah, we're using 9-inch swim baits just like everyone's doing now.
Yeah.
know?
I remember Marvin poured a bait called the Flying Fish that was a big flat topped traditional swim bait. It was 9 inches long and it had 2 wings. No, 2 wings in the front and 2 little wings in the back. Because understand, it's a flat pour, so you can't do a 3D type bait. So you've got to pour everything flat. So the wings were parallel with the back of the bait. And I remember Pfeiffer would fish that thing on a 1 ounce lead head with like a 9.0 hook in it. He had them custom poured.
Wow.
And, one night he got a 13.4. Benny had a couple of 11s.
13.4. That's not, the record's 14, right?
The record's 14, and it was caught that same spring by a guy in a whaler fishing just below Newport.
Were you there that time too?
I was there that day.
So it was you and Seacrest that were both... Was Seacrest there too or not?
I don't know if Benny was on that trip or not.
Okay.
It might have been Pfeiffer and I. It might have been Benny and I. It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
As I recall, that fish was caught in October, if I'm not mistaken. Guy was in a whaler, and I think he caught it slow trolling a live mackerel. But he caught it in that same stretch between basically Reef Point, what we call number 1s and number 2s. So between Reef Point and the harbor, there was a ton of big bass in there back in those days. I don't know if they're still there or not. But the whole throwing those big baits into the rocks in the evening, at our best month was usually April. And if we had like a real high tide peaking at like 9 o'clock in the evening and we had a lot of wind and a lot of kelp, that was our day. That's when we'd catch.
You like to seem to fish the evening better if you can.
We did because that's what we could do back then. So
you
we'd get off.
Okay, there you go.
It's kind of like we'd get off after work.
Yeah.
But Benny and I would look closely at the tides, or Dave Pfeiffer and I would look at the tides, and we'd try to time our fishing around a flooding tide. And it seemed like if we had a lot of west wind, not so much you couldn't fish, but enough west wind that we could handle it in an 18-foot center console with an old school bass style troll motor. And we just worked downhill throwing those big baits into the rocks, and we lost way more fish than we landed. And we're using 12 and 15 pound tests.
That's crazy.
On old Calcutta 200s when the Calcutta 200 first came out, and on a salmon rod called an 86 GT. I still use it to this day. It was a rod that Shimano made back then.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was kind of how it evolved. We evolved from a lot of bay fishing, and not just Newport Bay. I fished a lot in San Diego Bay, Mission Bay, all the bays along the coast. And
so Benny Florentino was kind of doing it up north more.
Well, Benny Florentino, and we all grew up together.
That's Florentino, what I like hearing the stories, connecting everything.
That was all surf culture stuff.
Yeah.
And we were all South Bay guys. I think Benny was working for Hap Jacobs in those days. And I didn't even know that Benny was much into fishing. I don't know how much fishing he really did back then, but he wasn't necessarily in my circle of guys that fish. Neither was Benny back then. Benny and I didn't start fishing until I think we were about 13 years old.
Okay.
But as it evolved and as we got in the industry, when you're in the fishing industry, then you're exposed to all the latest, greatest tackle. So having, one of my best friends be Dave Pfeiffer, we always had whatever was the latest, newest stuff. Benny was friends with a lot of the guys at Daiwa and with everybody else. So we always had good cutting edge gear, and it didn't take us long to realize we had to use a lot heavier line because we were getting destroyed on 12 and 16. At least I was.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I lost a lot of really huge bass. I only ever landed one over 10 pounds. Benny fished a lot more than I did, and I think he had a lot more luck. He had the golden horseshoes up his ass somewhere. and he landed. I think he landed 3 or 4 or 5 fish over 10. He can tell you.
Yeah.
But it was fun back in those days.
Yeah. I mean, the fishing had to have been just so much different than when you go calico fishing now. I'm sure San Clemente is a little different. And sure, I mean, I've been really fishing hard 2 years, maybe calico. And I mean, there's been days where it's been gone off and really gone crazy.
Yeah.
But how many different techniques did you have then also, because you only had maybe 4 different things? Like, were you trying to innovate? Were you going like, hey, I'm going to Carolina rig. Hey, I'm going to throw surface iron. Hey, I'm going to do this, something different.
My bag of tricks consisted of 3 items. I had my 1087 Loomis jig rod, my 9-foot jig stick. And I think at that time I had a jig master or something like that on it, and 40-pound Maxima or P-line. And I'm throwing a Tatty 45. That was number 1. Number 2 was a couple of swim bait rods, one with a 5-inch bait, one with a 6-inch bait, 3/4 ounce lead head on one, a 1 ounce lead head on the other, 12 on one, 16 on the other. Both of those on 86 GT, 8.5 foot swim bait style rods. And then the last thing I'd throw, we had a spinning rod with 10 or 12 pound test, throwing some kind of a curl-tail grub.
Really?
And usually it was that Mojo, or is it Mojo? Mojo or the Kalin's grub.
Okay.
The big Kalin's grub.
That was like your light setup then pretty much.
That was my light setup.
Okay.
And we crushed a lot of fish on that thing, especially when we'd get the fish outside the kelp line and they'd be chasing anchovies around or mackerel or smelt. We could use that lighter gear. A lot of time get bites on days when guys weren't catching them on anything else. But
yeah.
I caught tons of fish on the iron. I used to troll motor all the way around Santa Barbara Island or all the way around Anacapa, doing nothing but throwing the iron and smash the bass. Lots of them.
Yeah. And so do you feel like that you were using mono a lot at that time, correct?
100%.
Okay. So do you feel like that's missing these days? Like maybe some people got away from that when they could get bit a little differently with the mono? Or do you feel like it doesn't really play a role as much now when you fish calico?
Well, now that I've done so much of it in both fresh and salt water, if I'd had braided line back then, oh crap. I mean, the fish we'd landed. I mean, because we just got stretched and lost so many fish.
Yeah.
And we caught a lot of big white sea bass, a lot of yellowtail, a lot of black sea bass. We had a lot of bycatch back in those days.
Could you keep black sea bass then?
No.
Okay.
It was all catch and release
Always
back
okay.
then. But yeah, if I'd had braided line, if I'd had a Tranks loaded up with 80-pound braid on my 9-foot Loomis, look out.
You would have had that 13.4, huh?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, a lot of those fish would have got landed that we didn't land. So.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Is the big jump? You remember when braid came out? Were you still fishing calico, or were you moved over to freshwater then more?
I was doing more offshore fishing because I had built a bigger boat at that time. I had a custom boat built up in Oregon, a big Alumaweld, which was a big 1/4-inch thick hull.
Oh, that's a nice boat.
Heavy duty aluminum boat.
Yeah,
it was the first one built as a center console, and I designed the whole thing, the console, the bait.
You
tank.
like aluminum boats?
I did back then.
Okay.
I did. A lot of it for affordability reasons, and a lot of it because we could customize them. You could drill holes and bolt stuff to them, and you didn't have to be a fiberglass expert.
Now you're talking my language. I have a 17 low.
I saw it out there.
And I just built the center console for it, put hydraulic steering. So now I'm like, I put Crusoe board on the whole thing. So I'm
nice.
like real stoked. I like the difference is, I guess, because it's so wide, it's real stable. So when I bring the kids, we fish with all 3 guys, it's fine.
Yeah.
But then my buddy has like an outrage, and it's a little more. But it cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, but I like hearing from you about the aluminum boats, because a lot of people are interested about, like, a lot of guys have small aluminum boats, 14s, 15s, because they're cheaper. But yeah, break it all down. Like when you design that whole boat, that's great.
Well, we started in, I think my first aluminum boat was a little 13.5 Gregor that I decked and put a bait tank in, and had nice electronics and everything on it. And then I stepped from there to an 18-foot Starcraft center console, which was a great boat. Benny and I both had the exact same boat. Both of them rigged exactly the same way, because I rigged them, or we rigged them. And we caught dozens of marlin out of those boats. Lots of big sharks. Tuna.
What size motor did you have in that?
I had a 90 on mine.
Okay.
I think I had a 90 Mercury. I think Benny had a 90 Mariner on his. Okay. But those were the boats that kind of started it all for us, and they gave us more range to go to the islands and all that.
And those were center consoles?
Those were both center consoles. Okay. And then I went from the 18-foot Starcraft. Then I designed the Alumaweld boat with the guys up in Oregon. And it was a lot of back and forth. It was a full year to get that boat built.
So did you design the hull, like tell them what you wanted?
I took an existing hull that they had for a salmon boat, had them increase the dead rise to 18 degrees, had them increase the beam, I think 6 inches. I think it was 8 foot wide. So it was a really beamy boat.
So they had to change all this for you?
They changed all the tooling for me.
Wow. And do you keep that boat? You still have it?
I don't have it. A good friend of mine does.
Okay, but it's still local.
It's still local.
Okay,
it actually lives in Pasadena now.
Okay.
But it was a really cool boat. I'll send you some pictures of it.
No, I'd love to see that. That's very interesting. Like to actually build your aluminum hull the way you wanted it.
No, it was cool, and it was a 1/4 inch thick aluminum hull.
Wow.
So it was the boat would take a lot more than my body would.
Yeah.
But that boat, we trailered it to Mag Bay and caught dozens of marlin out of it. We caught big tuna out of it. We caught salmon. I mean, it had downriggers, it had outriggers, it had a big bait tank.
Wow.
Had a big fish box in the front. It had, multiple pumps for all the plumbing.
Wow.
It was a great boat. It had a 200 Mercury on it. Had a motor guide, long shaft troll motor, foot control, one of the first saltwater motors back in those days.
Was that the foot? Did it have tiller before that? Was it all tiller and now it's foot?
It was, there was foot control motors then, but not for saltwater.
Okay.
This is when Motor Guide first came out with the white motors.
Oh, so this is the first saltwater, everything built for the salt.
First ones.
Wow.
And
it wasn't for Florida. It was for. Did you have it over here more?
Well,
or were you in contact with them?
No, I bought the motor from Motor Guide.
Okay.
And it was when the first saltwater motors first came out. I think they called them Great Whites or something like that. And it was foot controlled and put it on the aluminum weld. But, the bow was really high on the aluminum weld, so I had to have a very long shaft. So we would rip the mounts apart. I mean, I went through mounts like every 5 trips. I'd have to put a new mount on it.
Really?
So I just had them keep sending them to me. And
just from the shaft being so long?
Just the shaft being long, ramming it up in the kelp, having it hit rocks, running in rough weather. Having the hardware vibrate loose and the whole thing just explode and end up on the deck of the boat. And the good thing was I had a relationship with the factory, and they were good folks that back in those days, that was the only choice. Now I'd be with the Minn Kota because their stuff's bulletproof. But that's how it all kind of came about.
I'm sure it was good for them too because they got to free R&D almost. You know what I'm saying? You beat the shit out of the thing, and they're like, "Hey, broke again."
Yeah, we gave them lots of feedback.
Yeah,
and I say that in a nice way. I mean, I didn't get frustrated because I don't think I was paying a lot for the motors, but a lot of that equipment that we developed in those days, I look and see these boats now. I see Florentino's boats or whatever. It's all the stuff that we were doing back then.
That's crazy.
Premium electronics. We had big Lowrance, big screen electronics back then. And remember when the paper graphs, that's all we had was paper graphs, and then we went to the LCD units, and we weren't handicapped by the gear that we had on the boat. And we were able to do it right.
Do you think that maybe because the more gear you get these days, and you've heard people talk about it in the freshwater, you lose some of that technique because you're not, or you could gain it. I guess some people say, I had Matt Magnon from Last Chance, saying you could pretty much video game fish. Where you see the fish. I mean, do you think people lose technique, or do you think that's helping them gain technique because they can actually see and feel and know the bite more than just blind casting sometimes? And
I think it's made a lot of fair fishermen into good fishermen. I think it's made a lot of good fishermen into great fishermen. I know that the electronics I have now on my boats with my side imaging and all the 3D and all that stuff, if I'd have had that stuff 20 years ago, oh crap, especially on the freshwater side.
Yeah.
Because now I can look at a rock pile that's from here to my pickup truck out there in the street and not drive right over the top of it. And I'm a freak about being stealth anyway.
Yeah.
So no, I'm a big believer in quality electronics, and I'm a big Lowrance guy. I have a ton of their stuff on the boat, but whether it's Humminbird or the new Garmin Panoptic stuff is amazing.
Nice.
I mean, it's kind of the sky's the well, your pocketbook's the limit.
Yeah, I don't got that kind of.
but back in those days, we had good electronics. We had the best stuff that Lowrance made, and so our boats were well rigged. But our whole deal back then was, calico bass was one goal, but my goal was marlin, tuna, salmon, offshore stuff, pulling the boat to Mexico, pulling the boat up to Northern California. So I wanted the boat to do a little bit of everything because my interests are wide. I caught some of my biggest bass out of that, freshwater bass out of that.
Really?
Boat. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I used to fish green bass out of that thing at Castaic all the time. But, that was my vehicle back then. I had one, so it had to do everything.
Yeah. Were you, so the calico thing, kind of what year was that? Maybe
The calico thing was in the late 80s. I think we started really going outside the harbor and crushing it in I want to say 89.
Okay.
88, 89. I think Benny came to work for us about 88. So it would have been, and I went to work at AFTCO in 86. So it was about 89.
Okay. When did you transition to more green bass?
Well, I've always done both.
So you were still grinding at both, like freshwater lake?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my roots are freshwater fishing
Okay.
from way back. I grew up fishing down in San Diego with my dad and fishing all the San Diego lakes. So we would do the green bass thing in the early spring and the wintertime. I don't like fishing in the heat. So in the late spring and the summer, we convert over to saltwater.
Yeah.
And then in the fall, there's some hunting mixed in there along with some fall fishing, for offshore species and all that. So I still kind of operate that way. I'm right now in my transition phase. I'm leaving the offshore, starting to green bass fish. Just took the champion for 4 days. I just got home.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm doing more green bass stuff as it cools off.
Yeah.
And then I'm leaving to go to Montana and Oregon and all these other places to
Fly
go hunting.
fishing stuff?
Fly fishing and hunting. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I do it seasonally.
Yeah. Were you, back then when you were catching the big calico, were you at Castaic when they started catching big?
I was.
Okay.
I was there in, I had my Starcraft in those days, which was totally rigged out with a troll motor and swivel seats and the whole deal. We used it for everything.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I caught a lot of big bass at Castaic way back in the day.
Yeah.
Lots
that was the whole story of it. I had Danny Cadota on.
Yeah.
That was a great one. He kind of talked about anchoring up and Butch Brown. And I mean, even Seacrest said he remembered going there, at that time. And everyone's kind of in line trying to go to get that big fish,
Right. No, Benny was with me in those days. And I don't think he'd done a lot of freshwater bass fishing, maybe a little bit, but not so much of that style. Mm-hmm. And he was with me when we caught a couple of really big fish way back in the day in my little 13.5 Gregor.
Wow. At Castaic?
At Castaic, yeah.
How big the fish were you catching then?
My biggest fish was 14.25.
Wow, that's great.
No monsters. I mean, no giants.
That's a big fish, man.
Well, but I mean, compared to my peers, to Danny and Butch Brown and some of the guys that Krupe and a lot of the guys I was around in those days. But then again, a lot of those guys could fish a lot more hours than I could too.
They were fishing 24/7, like at the lake. Were you fishing crawdads then, or were you fishing baits?
I fished everything.
Okay.
And I caught big fish there on everything from worm king dinosaurs to crawfish to worms and jigs, and we used it all. And that was the other thing, is my focus wasn't totally on bait, which it probably should have been. I'd have caught a lot more big fish, but I like to catch fish on everything.
Yes.
So even though I kind of grew up fishing the San Diego lakes, where you're not a bait fisherman or a lure fisherman, you're a bass fisherman.
Yes.
So I kind of transferred some of that to Castaic, but I was a little slow to pick up on the guys that were really getting after it with the bait and catching giants on that stuff.
That might have held you back though from getting that giant. You know what I'm saying? Because you were in the middle of throwing that stuff, like you said. So, I mean, it's a great fish for the type of fishing you're doing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But it was. I mean, it was good. I mean, I caught. With Benny, I got a 13.25, and with my dad, we caught, I don't know how many fish over 10 pounds, but many, many dozens at Castaic. But we just could never seem to get over the 13, 14 pound mark. I always, at that lake, wanted to get a fish bigger than 14, but never got it done.
I heard, did someone get a 14 recently?
There's been a few caught every year. Some you hear about, a lot you don't hear about. I think the last big fish I heard of at Castaic, some guy caught it fishing stripers, and it was 15 pounds or 16 pounds.
That's big.
But that's a rare animal there now.
Yeah. Those fish aren't there anymore, huh?
Well, I don't think so. I think the stripers take the top end off, just like they've done at Diamond Valley and so many other places where they, you get the stripers in there and they outcompete that open water Florida bass that wants to go out and eat trout and shad. Mm-hmm. And they just can't put the pounds on like they can without the competition there.
Yeah. Yeah, that striper killed. I mean, I fished DVL for like not too long, maybe 8 years. Yeah. And I felt like it was a little better then, but I was fishing drop shot. I fish everything at that time. Now I fish swim baits a little more, but it seemed a little less pressure. But then again, I'm not the best angler, like where dudes could figure it out, figuring the lake out and doing kind of what you guys did for the calico on the lakes. Were you doing the same type of thing when you'd go to Castaic? Were you kind of doing the same homework and being like, okay, this is what we're doing today, we got to figure out this? Yeah.
And I was a spot fisherman. I mean, I had several reefs that I liked to fish, and if I didn't get lined up on one, I'd go to another, and we got it done, and we had X15 graphs, and knew how to read the paper graph really well and all that. Mm-hmm. But just again, I wasn't dialed in on the weekdays. Mm-hmm. And I had to fish weekends, and didn't have sources for bait and all that stuff like so many of the guys did, and so it was a little frustrating. And then there was a lot of subterfuge going on. There was a lot of guys fishing illegally. There was a lot of BS going on back in those days.
Arizona anchovies.
Yeah, there was lots of that.
Was it really?
And my dad and I, we had a guide service at Casitas, Castaic, and Cachuma back in those days.
Oh, no way.
Back in the 80s, yeah.
Really?
And we did that for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, nice.
And, at Casitas, we were getting big limits of fish on pretty much everything. We were using some worms, we were using some crawfish, using whatever. But there was other guys that were on the lake at the same time as we were, and their limits, instead of getting a 50, 60, 70-pound 10-fish limit, their limits were weighing close to 100 pounds.
What do you? I mean, when they're like doing it legally, like what? I mean, just live bait fishing with
there was a whole trout network going on.
Really?
There was a whole trout thing going on back in those days. I mean, it was.
So they were fly lining trout.
They're fly lining trout, absolutely. Or they were catching them and using them. And anyway, I mean, that's a whole nother vein.
That's just wild. I mean,
another vein of discussion.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to do. Like I personally, when I got into fishing, I thought you could never fish any live bait at a lake. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you can fish like shiners, right? And like
at some lakes. Yeah. Yeah. At some lakes you can fish shad if you net them out of the lake, and
exactly.
Crawfish in almost all the lakes.
Yeah.
And, it used to be water dogs and mudsuckers.
Yeah.
And there was lots of legal ways to fish, but there were a few people and they were involved in the tackle business that were doing things illegally.
That's horrible.
And now, of course, we all know about it and we know who the players were. But back then I used to scratch my head and go, holy crap.
How old were you then, though, when you guys had the guide service?
I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
I was 22 to 26, 28.
You guys were doing that on the weekends? Or
did it on the weekends, almost exclusively on the weekends. My dad and I both rotated off.
So you're working at AFTCO Monday through Friday, and then...
This before I worked at AFTCO.
Before you worked at AFTCO.
Yeah, this was 4 or 5 years before I worked at AFTCO.
Where were you working then?
I was a tool maker and a machinist.
Wow.
So I was we had a business over in Gardena, and I was building tooling and doing a lot of work for the aircraft industry. So I had some free time. I had some money. And so I was able to get away more than I could when I went to work for AFTCO. When I went to work for AFTCO, I could get away a lot, but it was always on business.
Not fishing.
Not fishing. Well, a lot of it was fishing, but I couldn't do like the guys that I envied, like Cadota and so many of those guys that, they had businesses and they had to work hard running boats and everything. I'm not saying they didn't work hard.
Yeah.
But they had the ability to choose their days.
Yes.
Kind of like I can now.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that back then.
Yeah.
My day, I'm getting ready Friday night, and if I'm lucky, I go to the lake Friday night, spend the night in line, and fish Saturday.
Which the pressure from Friday to Wednesday is completely different on the lake, right?
Totally. Now I was at Skinner yesterday on a Monday, and there was 3 boats there.
I don't fish I try not to fish during the weekend either.
Yeah.
And I have 3 boys, so it's kind of like when they were in school pre-COVID, it was nice because I'd be like, you're in school, mom's cool with me going, in the morning. I leave at 4.
Yeah.
I run down to, that's why I stopped fishing freshwater so much. I can run to Huntington Harbor, launch. I'm there in 20 minutes,
Yeah.
I'm done by 12. And she's happy.
And for the most part, that the cool thing about the inshore saltwater, and it's one of the things that Benny and I really liked, you get so many bites, catch so many fish. We'd catch 100 fish in a night at Newport Bay.
Yeah.
No problem. We'd go fish the calicos, and I kept logbooks. I've got logbooks going back to the late 70s.
Do you still keep logbooks?
I do.
Really?
Every single trip. Every trip.
I need to do that. I that's one thing that is very interesting to me, because do you go and look back? So say you keep a logbook and you're like, okay, I was here this day. What worked for me?
Exactly.
Oh, that's
I
such
do
a
it all
good
the time.
idea.
Because see, in freshwater, even though things change and the lakes cycle and the conditions change and water levels change, you can a lot of times, like I was just up at Isabella, and I was there for 2 days, and then I drove down to Skinner because it was crappy up there. But I can look back 15, 20 years ago and say, okay, what did I do the middle of October? Well, I was going to Isabella, or I was going to Skin, or I was going to Paris, or whatever, as I transition away from saltwater. And many, many times those fish are going to be in the same places doing the same things as they were back then, given reasonably similar conditions, water level, wind level, temperature, all those kinds of things. So for me, that's been a big help in my fishing. And if I was a smarter guy, I'd have it all on a computer spreadsheet where I could easily go back and reference it. But instead, I've got to pull out my tide logs and thumb through them.
But I think that's, to me, I'd rather have it kind of like, I like the paper.
Yeah.
Like, will you go and put in the spot you caught it at?
Oh, absolutely.
The time of day, everything.
Yes.
So will you stop fishing and do that?
No, I do it at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah, I do it at the end of the day, or when I get home the next day.
Yeah.
Like I haven't filled out my log for the last 5 days that I fished, and I do it for fishing and hunting and everything else. But I'll go down and I'll fill out the pertinence. The water temperature, the water level. Like at Isabella when I was there, it was at 46, which is kind of a decent level. It's not real high.
Where did you get to check that water level at?
I go online and check
online and it'll tell you?
Yeah, it'll tell you online.
Wow, yeah.
So for a lake like Isabella that I've fished for 30, 40 years now, I know at certain water levels what spots work and what spots don't.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to go reference it. And I know at 46, I can go back to 2015. The water was at 46 in October, and here's what we were catching. So I use it for a point of reference.
Okay.
In that way.
Yeah. Did you ever do any tournament freshwater fishing?
I did some. I fished the Western Bass tournaments way back in the day. At that time, I had an 18-foot another Starcraft. It was a bass boat. And I fished them, and I was a crappy tournament fisherman. I was really good at catching 2 5-pounders, but I wasn't real good at catching 5 3-pounders or 5 2-pounders. So I'd get beat by that guy every time. And
you think you still have that mentality do you have a mentality where you want to go out and catch 5-pounders or 8-pounders or 10-pounders? Or are you trying just to catch quantity more than quality?
I'm trying to catch big fish every time I go. Yeah. Every time I go, I'm trying to catch. But now I'm not a freak to where, I'm going to fish all day to get one bite.
Yeah.
Although that happens a lot. But I am generally focused on bigger fish, on outside reefs pretty much every trip that I go. My focus is not drop shot. It's not little Senkos up in the bushes. It's not flipping or frogging, even though you can catch big fish doing that. My approach is usually jigs or worms on reefs or swim baits.
Swim baits.
I like to throw swim baits. I don't like to catch fish on them because it's kind of a joke. I mean,
Why so?
Well, I've caught fish up to 14 pounds on swim baits, and on a Tranks with 65-pound braided line and 25-pound leader on an 8.5-foot swim bait rod.
You feel like there's no way for them to win.
There's no freshwater bass in the world that can pull an inch of drag. I know some guys will laugh at that, but
I like to hear your point of view because I've had a lot of swim bait guys on too. I like to hear like Kelly Popo. He told me he's not a swim bait fisherman. It's like more of a tool, but he's caught a lot of big fish.
Yeah.
Some guys, like I said, nowadays, I feel like there's a genre just of swim bait fishing.
Yeah.
Like its own deal, which is fine. But I feel like hearing like your perspective, like where you go, well, are you like the fish to have some kind of fighting chance, maybe?
Well, I prefer catching fish on light spinning gear if I can. I don't mind catching them on bait casting gear, but grinding a big fish in on like I say, 8.5-foot spinning rod with 25-pound leader, on a HUD, it's cool. It's great. I dig it. I admire Butch Brown and a lot of those guys that do it. It's just for me, it's not my pleasure. It's like marlin fishing. I do a ton of marlin fishing. I've done it for many, many years. Caught hundreds of striped marlin. I like catching them, but I don't care about catching them on 50-pound tests. I don't care about catching them on 30-pound tests.
What do people usually use?
30 or 50.
And what are you using?
We're using 12.
Wow.
16, 20.
Really?
And using a lot of times we're using Dacron or we're using very, very light line because it's more of a challenge. How many stripers you want to catch on 30-pound? I mean, it's so
that you like to have more of the challenge. It's you're challenging yourself.
I like the tackle. I like the light tackle.
Yeah.
And the same for, fishing big bass. And there are some, admittedly, there's a lot of situations where you can't use it, where you're just going to get tuned up if you hook a big fish on light line. But if I could have my preference, it would be fishing an outside reef at Isabella using a lighter spinning rod with light braided line and fluorocarbon leader and stitching an 8-inch worm. I mean, that would be my ultimate.
Yeah.
Just because it's more fun. It's more interesting to me.
I think it takes a little more talent to fight that fish with light line like that too. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because you're not going to donkey that thing in.
No, it takes a little more talent.
Yeah.
But I don't really care so much about that. It's just, for me, it's more enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's more fun.
No, I agree. That's like, usually when I go out, I just like to catch fish.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll use whatever the hell it takes to catch.
Nothing wrong with that.
like when I go, I love the jerk shad. So I usually throw it all the time, for calico.
Yeah.
But, so let's talk about AFTCO a little, because you've been there a long time.
I was there a long time, up until December.
Oh, really?
Oh, I retired.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, I thought you knew. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, congrats.
I would thank
That's
you.
why you're gone fishing all the time now.
That's why I'm fishing during the week. That's what I told you. I'm living the dream now. No, I worked at AFTCO, went to work for AFTCO for Bill Shedd and the Shedd family back in 1986, and worked as their sales manager. Handled all the product on the... Well, I was on the clothing and the hardware side at one time, but then evolved to be just hardware. And I just retired in December. It was a great run, awesome company, great people to work for, and just a ton of fun being involved in the business.
Yeah. So AFTCO primarily was salt a little, right? More? Or do you think they do more fresh and salt?
Well, we were 100% saltwater, or they were 100% saltwater for the first 20 some years I was there. And then back in the 80s, was it 80s or the 90s? In the 90s, when the clothing came in, it was still mostly a saltwater focus. But then eventually, as Bill's sons took over, they moved the business more into fresh and saltwater. So it was a little bit of both, knowing that freshwater, for every saltwater angler, there's 5 freshwater anglers.
I know.
Or more. So they were smart to move the business that way and to tailor products for the freshwater guy. Now, man, I go to a lake and, most of the guys I see bass fishing are wearing something from AFTCO.
Yeah, definitely.
So it was a great move for them to do that. But when I was there, my primary focus was hardware and developing new product, selling the product that we had.
So did you work in R&D as well?
I did all of the product development.
What's some of the stuff that you came out with that you're very proud of?
The little lightweight roller guides.
Really?
That are titanium, have the little titanium rollers in them and the graphite frames. The Goldfinger outrigger clips.
Oh, wow.
I was involved with the gaffs. I was all involved with the knives, which are brand new.
Yeah.
The new leader material, we sourced that over in Japan, and that was a project.
Oh, you guys have the fluorocarbon now,
the
right?
cyclofluorocarbon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was one of the last projects I worked on there, that and the knives. Mm-hmm. But pretty much everything beyond, unibutts were there. The roller troll outrigger clip was there when I got there, and then many of the styles of roller guides other than the lightweight guides. But I developed the wind-on guides, developed the super extra heavy-duty guides, which are the big aluminum frame guides, and just a whole ton of product improvement and new products along the way. And that was my deal.
Your background in machining and tooling probably helped a lot.
Fit right in.
Yeah.
It fit in, that and being involved in all kinds of tournament fishing and everything before I went to work for AFTCO. Mm-hmm. I kind of had both sides of it, and I've been a rod builder since I was 10 years old.
Oh, really?
So I was, I grew up with Jerry Morris and Yo Yoshida and buying rod components from those guys and going in their stores when I was a little kid. And then Redondo was kind of a hotbed of the real early tackle development, custom rod wrapping, just that whole cutting edge thing. Redondo, Gardena, Torrance, it was all right there. And because my dad was a lifelong fisherman, I was exposed to all that when I was really young. Mm-hmm. So I was going into Yo's and Jerry's and buying blanks and stuff with my dad when I was 10, 12, 13.
Wow.
And then building rods. So it was a natural progression for me to go to work for AFTCO with my engineering background and tooling background and my ability to understand how rods are built. Mm-hmm. And then I spent a lot of time, overseas and in basically every rod factory in the country, whether it's Loomis or St. Croix or Penn or whoever, seeing how they did it.
Yeah.
And understanding how the components all work together.
Yeah. Do you still wrap all your own rods?
I do. I do.
Okay.
Not all my own rods, but I do most of them. Yeah,
right.
I do most of them. We use a lot of Shimano factory stuff on the boat, on my ocean boat. And then for a lot of my freshwater fishing, I pretty much 100% build everything.
Okay. And you're doing tournaments. Did you do Marlin Tournaments to do the same thing?
I do. I do a lot of club tournaments, club level tournaments.
Yeah.
I don't fish any money tournaments because I'm a Avalon Tuna Club member, and we don't do money tournaments. But fish for trophies and pats on the back and that kind of stuff.
What's your big Marlin?
Well, here, striped marlin here, we release most of them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I can tell you stories about many of them that were over 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. But locally, I've caught lots of fish on 12-pound line. And those are memorable, not so much for the fact that the size of the marlin, because I've had my ass kicked by 100-pounders, but, probably on 12-pound line, I've had several fish that were in the 200-pound class.
Wow.
That we didn't kill, but I've been around enough dead marlin that I can tell you what size they are.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal and a lot of fun. And, a lot of times you lose and sometimes you win on that tackle. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you get stretched out and broke off. Sometimes they chafe off. Wow. Sometimes you fight them for 5 hours and they come unhooked. So all that stuff, regardless of the size of the marlin, it's a big deal on light line. But as far as my biggest marlin on any tackle anywhere was I was fishing over in Portugal back in the 90s and caught a blue marlin that was, somewhere in the 1,000-pound category on 80-pound stand-up.
How was that?
It was amazing.
Scary?
It was scary.
You've seen those videos, like a dudes where they fly into the boat and stab people and stuff, right?
Yeah, this fish was, it bit half a mile out of the harbor. And on the first run with a Shimano Tiagra 80 on a stand-up rod, the first run was 400 yards.
Oh, my God.
And we were chasing the fish, alongside of it, trying to gain line. So it was not an easy fish to land. But we got the fish up to the boat, and the leaderman got the leader, and we got video of all of it.
Oh my God.
And it was with a guy by the name of Stuart Campbell, who is world famous, and he's no longer with us. But yeah, so it was an amazing trip, and caught an amazing giant fish.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
You ever try to chase the line class record or something for the Marlin?
You know, most of the records are so far out of reach.
Mm-hmm.
They're so ridiculous, the sizes and all that. I mean, I understand that fishery. I've not done a lot of it. I've done it on a club level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in our club, tried to catch, record size fish on light line, and had some success and lots of failure on that. The guy I was fishing with in Portugal, Stuart Campbell, and his group were some of the best light line world record marlin fishermen in the world. Matter of fact, they probably were the best at the time.
Uh-huh.
And he held a number of blue marlin records. And so it was interesting to see how they did it, and how they handled the boat, and it was all bait and switch. So these big giant blue marlin are coming right up in the wake, literally at your feet, and then you're switching them from a lure that has no hook in it off to a rigged bait. So you're dropping the bait back to them.
Yeah.
So the bites are spectacular. They're right behind the boat, and a 1,000-pound fish has a head about as big as this table. Oh my God. So when he comes out of the water and eats, it's enough to make your heart stop.
Oh, I bet. You and I feel like maybe with the light line, do you have to control the boat a little differently?
Totally.
Because you can't just donkey anything in, or
It's a whole team effort. It's a whole team effort. And even here, how we do it on 12-pound here, my brother captains the boat that we're partners in, and he knows what to do. He knows how to follow the line and not the fish, and how to pick line up without getting the belly so big behind the boat that you break the fish off. And there's a whole lot to it.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother, the boat driving and the boat handling on light line is a whole nother ball game that most people will never get there. But if they focus on it, there's some guys here that are really super good at it.
Yeah.
But it's very challenging.
Are you catching these locally?
Oh yeah.
You will?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. All the striped marlin we caught this year, we caught a handful of them. They were all between Anacapa and San Clemente Island.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
We fish a lot up at Anacapa and Santa Cruz.
It's a little rougher up there. The weather can get a little.
Yeah, it can be a lot. It can be a lot rougher and a lot nastier. But when the billfish are in, a lot of times when the warm water works its way up there, there's so much bait up there. When the California undercurrent hits those islands and pitches out to the west, the billfish will build up in there, whether it's swordfish or marlin or whatever. So because our boat's in Redondo, the ocean boat's in Redondo, we spend a lot of time running that way. And if we're fishing bluefin, we spend a lot of time running to Clemente. So both directions.
What size boat is that you guys
have?
It's
a 33 Brigantine, Owens Brigantine.
Did you do a lot of research on this one before you decided to get it?
My brother and I both were looking for a bigger ocean boat. I had a 25 skipjack flybridge that was diesel powered and sold it 5 or 6 years ago. So we wanted to step up something bigger with twin diesels, and this boat was in San Pedro. It's a 1966 total restoration project. We bought it. Most of it was done, and we ended up doing a lot more work to it. But it's a Costa Mesa built boat, and just a tank. I mean, just super seaworthy. And we just put new motors in it. We just put a new pair of Cummins, 315 Cummins in it. So it's got lots of power, good electronics, big bait tanks. It's a great boat for the size that it is, and it's almost affordable for the two of us.
Almost is the key word.
Yeah, it's she's a hungry bitch. Things are always breaking.
No, I get it. I mean, just doing a little boat. You've been doing boats your whole life, so it's kind of like these little boat projects. Even as like thousands of dollars later, I'm like, because you twinker with one thing and you go, let me just make it perfect, all of it. Well, let me just do all the electrical because it'll be all perfect and labeled. Then next thing you know, I'm spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars just on this little boat. And it's like,
that's the way the Brigantine's been. It's been a great boat, but because the bones are 1966, it's had a lot of holes drilled in it and lots of gear taken on and off of it, and so it's a never-ending maintenance of everything that's on it. And then when you use things a lot, things break. We go through pumps. We have electrical problems. We have electronics that fail. We have canvas that fails. We have things that leak and things that need to be fiberglassed and painted. So it's never ending, but it's a labor of love for us. We both love doing it. Luckily, my brother he's a contractor, so he has some time, that he can work on the boat. And he does most of the grunt work on it.
Is he older or younger?
He's my youngest
then
brother.
He should be doing the grunt work.
Yeah. Well, both of us are getting old enough that doing boat yoga is no longer fun.
You have sons, right?
I had one son, and he passed away.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
A few years ago. Thank you.
You built a boat too, right?
Well, we my son and I did most of the work on the skipjack back in the day when we had
that's
it.
a cool. I just looked at your Instagram and I kind of saw, is it really, or
Yeah.
it was Facebook, or I'm
Probably
not sure.
Probably on the Facebook.
Yeah.
So no, he did a ton of work on the boat, and then he worked on boats until he went in the Navy. And so he was a big help with all that stuff, and of course fished with me a lot.
A lot of boat work. Was he real hands on with you on the boat work too?
Oh, totally.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, totally. And he was good at all of it.
Yeah.
And it's just a fact, as you get older, crawling in the bilge just is not an option anymore.
I'm 40 and I need to lose weight. I'm overweight, but getting in there and working on the stuff, I'm like, come here, get inside this thing. I can't reach, I got a 16, an 11 and a 3-year-old. So one of them will work.
Oh, you got a lot of crew coming along then.
My oldest one doesn't fish as much. I put my middle son in a spotty tournament. He did okay.
Oh, that's good.
But whatever, they play music. My
Yeah.
oldest son plays music, so
Yeah.
he does. I'll let him do whatever he wants.
Well, I've got my grandson coming along now, and he's 10, and I had him with me at Skinner 2 days ago, and he enjoys it. He
Is he
loves
casting
loves
on
to
his
fish.
own and
Oh yeah,
everything?
he's doing everything on his own.
Baitcaster or spinning?
More with spinning gear.
Oh, I forgot you're spinning guy.
Yeah,
right?
well, I use a lot
I'm
of
just
bait casting
messing
gear,
with you.
but he spinning gear is easier for
Okay,
him.
yeah.
But he really loves bait fishing because there's so much action,
Yeah.
and that's fun for him, and so it's a lot of fun for me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's neat taking him, and my daughter lives out in Menifee, and
Okay.
so I have a grandson and a granddaughter.
Oh, great.
On that side,
Yeah.
and so we take them quite a bit, but my grandson loves it, and he's caught a bunch of big bass. He got a 6-pounder on Sunday. So,
Yeah.
So he's
You take the whole family out on the boat too, I'm sure, right?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. If my wife is not so into it, unless it's a Catalina relaxed trip.
Yeah.
But
does she fish at all?
She fishes a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
she's caught some marlin and some bass
Oh,
and
wow.
stuff. So
Nice.
she's done a bit of that.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole family affair for us, and it's kind of always been that way.
Yeah.
But the big boat is a lot of fun to run. We run it hard. We caught a couple swordfish in it this year. We caught lots of big bluefin out of it, but at the end of the year, or at the end of the season for us, which is pretty much the end of September, 1st of October, by that time, I'm pretty much worn out. I'm out of money, and I'm ready to do something different.
Now you're retired. It's all a little different now. Huh?
It's totally different now. It's not the same.
You're not just blowing money on trips anymore.
No, I got to be a lot more careful, but I'm not complaining. I'm very blessed to be able to do so many of the things I get to do.
And I'm sure working at AFTCO, you got to travel and fish a lot of different lakes.
Tons.
Right?
Tons. Places all over the country and in many places around the world. So it was...
Really?
Yeah, it was interesting.
Did you fish, was it El Salto?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I went to El Salto, oh God, it's probably been 15 years ago. It was great fun.
Yeah.
Neat place. Went to Billy Chapman's place there, or
Okay.
Billy Chapman Jr., and fished Salto and caught a ton of fish, and didn't get any giants. I think we had fish up to 8 pounds, but tons of fish that were 3 to 5 pounds. And for
That's
us,
nice.
it was fishing deep cranks and fishing jigs and all that kind. I think 10-inch power worms were kind of the deal back then.
Yeah.
Great big ledge buster spinner baits, 1 ounce spinner baits.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
That sounds a lot of fun. Since you've done so much fishing and traveling, what lakes do you think that you really liked as a freshwater bass fisherman across the U.S.? Like where you're like, well, do you think like, well, I think California has pretty good lakes, or...
I think there's a lot of potential in California, but I don't think it's right here. I mean, I always say, and like my dad always used to say, my favorite kind of fishing is whatever fishing I'm doing at the time.
Yeah.
And I love to do it all. I do a lot of trout fishing. I do a lot of offshore stuff, a little bit of everything. But as far as California goes, lakes are always cycling in and out. And when I first started fishing DVL right after it opened in 2003, I thought that was the end of the world. I mean, that was some of the best fishing I've ever seen.
The jewel of California.
It was incredible. I mean, the giant trout, the big healthy, F1 Floridas, and I thought that's just going to be the all-time best in the world lake. And then when they went through those low water years and they allowed all the stripers to get in there and all the flatheads got transferred in there, it totally screwed that lake up. So there's still guys that catch fish there now. But to answer your question, I had a great time at Clear Lake when I was up there. I think if I could pick one area of the state of California where I would love to spend a ton of time, it would be the foothill lakes in the Central Valley. So
Really?
basically at the bottom end, Isabella, Cahuilla, and at the top end, lakes like New Malones, Don Pedro, Comanche. Those are some really cool places, and they're huge, and there's pressure there, but not like there is down here. And every time I've gone to those lakes, we've crushed them, especially New Malones.
I like hearing Isabel because not a lot of people like fishing there.
It's not an easy lake to
People
fish.
hate it. A lot of dudes that I talk to, but it seems like you put your time in there.
I hate that stingy bitch myself. I just got back from there. I took a fucking whooping up there.
But do you feel like you fished that lake a little more because it's a tough lake? It's a challenge. Do you like that challenge?
It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. And some of the biggest challenges at Isabella are the weather.
That's why I heard the wind gets crazy.
And the water level. Yeah. And I was there, what day did I go up? I went up there Friday. When I got there Friday, I fished for about an hour and the wind blew 25.
Oh, shit.
And then you're hiding. And the problem with Isabella is the areas of the lake that you can fish in the big wind, which always comes from the dam, that's the fishing's crappy there. You need to fish downwind. Downwind's where all the fish are. But when it's blowing 25 there and there's 3 feet of chop, you can't do it. Even in my 20-foot champion, I'm taking waves over the bow and by myself.
Yeah.
And it's just, so, Isabella is a great place to start, but there are other lakes up in the California foothills that are awesome. That are guys fish them, but that whole area from New Malone's, Don Pedro, I forget the names of some of the other lakes that are in that area. All those lakes are incredible. And Kauai can be really good at times, but Kauai and Isabella, the other problem they have is they move the water around so much. And if they would
really affects it a lot.
Affects it a ton. Affects it a ton because it stresses the fish.
Yeah.
So a lake that might have had really big fish in it that were really happy and growing and everything, they drop the water level down to 7 or 8 or 10%, and you concentrate all that fish, and you get winter kill, and the bait dies off, and it's just not good for the fishing. So to answer your original question, I wouldn't give you any one particular lake, but I would
area.
All that area. And then Clear Lake, of course, is cycled back up again, and it's really good. I mean, lately I've been going to Havasu in the wintertime, having great trips to Havasu. I love that place.
Yeah,
but you're not going to get a 10 there.
Yeah. I like going to Catherine's Landing right there in Laughlin. Striper, smallmouth, whatever. I'll catch whatever. I just want to catch fish. Do you think the stripers really affect a lot of the lakes too?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just bring the size down, bring the quantity down.
They've ruined Castaic.
Yeah.
They've more or less ruined DVL.
Yeah.
They're in Paris. Thankfully in Paris, I don't think they're breeding. They're not getting a lot of little ones, but they're there in Paris. And, Skinner's got a lot of them.
They got a lot.
They got a lot of stripers, but Skinner's got a good healthy population of bass too, because there's so much bait in there. But yeah, I don't think the stripers are a good thing by any means. And I personally, I like catching stripers. I've caught a lot of big stripers, but it's not my number one target.
Will you kill them if you catch them?
No, not usually.
No.
I'll turn them loose. I mean,
Well, I know some dudes will go like, they fucking killed them. They're done. If they come and I'm like, I get it, and conservation for stripers is like a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. If I caught one at Paris, a bigger one at Paris, I'd probably kill it and give it away.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want them in there. It's one lake that does not need stripers.
Yeah.
On top of all the other issues there. But, Paris is going through a good cycle right now. Lake's up high and fish are biting pretty good. And there's some quality fish in there.
Yeah, that's what I heard. You'll hit all those lakes too. Then all the time when you're fishing locally?
Yeah. They're all part of
they're your local lakes.
Part of my winter circuit.
Now, no marlin right now. When's a good time for marlin?
The marlin there's still a few of them out there, but that pretty much tails off at the first part of October.
Okay.
When we get the first couple of big wind events like we had right now, that makes that fishing kind of go away. Those fish start pushing back out to the west and to the south. So that's all pretty much done. And like I told you earlier, I love to freshwater bass fish, but not when it's 100 degrees.
Neither do I.
So I don't go to the river. I don't go to Paris. I don't go to Skin. None of those places. Yeah. If it's over 85, I'm out. I'm not going. I'll go do something else.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of a natural progression to go from the offshore scene to the freshwater scene. And then I do a lot of hunting this time of year too.
Yeah. So you've been hunting your whole life then too, right?
I have. Yeah.
Wow. What's your some of your big kills?
Well, I only hunt feathers. I don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I don't hunt for fur at all. So I'm one of those guys that just likes to kill birds. Yeah. And I do a lot of goose hunting, a lot of duck hunting. Have some friends in NorCal that own a bunch of property up there on the Rice, so I do a lot of hunting in the Rice up there. Just got back from the Klamath Refuge up in Northern California and Oregon, and hunted geese up there. Shot a bunch of speckle bellies and some Canadians and a mallard. And then I hunt a lot over in the Sierras for upland game, for quail and chukar, and some for ducks there as well. And then I'm going to Montana here in 2 weeks, going to Montana for 10 days to hunt ducks, geese, pheasant, do some
Wow.
fly fishing for trout on the Missouri River. And so I kind of like it all. I'm an equal opportunity outdoor enthusiast.
Man, it must be nice. That retirement sounds really good right now.
It helps a lot.
You put your time in, though.
Well, yeah, I got no complaints.
And that's crazy. You've been in the fishing and worked in the fishing industry that long. I mean, a lot of people don't have that long of a career.
No,
one company, AFTCO the whole time?
I was with AFTCO the whole time.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. And it was the best, in my opinion, one of the best companies in the whole business. And I had one of the best jobs in the business. I mean, I was sales manager at a company that was highly respected, super active in the whole marine environment protection side of it, with the CCA and all the other organizations that Bill Shedd's been involved with and that I was involved with. And so it was a great company to work for, not just because it paid well or because we made great stuff, but because of the people, because of the respect the company got, and because of all the advocacy we did for marine issues. And that's a huge part of it. And so it was a lot more to working at AFTCO than just, punching a clock every day.
Do you still deal with the marine conservation stuff? Do you still help out
I do.
with that?
I'm on the CCA board.
What's up? Okay, can you explain the whole AB 3030 to me? Because I've seen a couple people send it to me. And let's get one thing straight. I got some shit. I did some stuff with the California Marine Act Federation. It's like up north in Monterey. So I did a post just saying, hey, know where your MLPAs are. I'm not trying to advocate more. I'm just saying, hey, they asked me if I'd help promote. I'm saying, great, no problem. Just know where they're at. So when you're fishing that certain fathom curve or whatever,
sure,
don't get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble by any cops.
No, that's reasonable. Nothing wrong with that.
And but I do want to know, like, you seen what Newsom said. Explain the whole thing if you don't mind, so people might know exactly what's going on.
So let me give it to you in a nutshell. Okay, so they want 30% of California protected by the year 2030. Okay, so what that means, 30% in the marine environment. Okay, now we're only at I think there's 12 or 14%
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
They want to go to 30%.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they want to do 30% on the land too. So areas that you like to hike and hunt and fish and do things like that, they want to put a grab on that. Make no mistake about it. That whole lobby in California is super well funded, super educated, and they're doing everything they can to take people like us that are what we call consumptive users. In other words, you like to catch a fish, you like to shoot a duck, whatever. They want none of that.
Yeah.
They want that area protected for the kayak guy, the surfer, the photographer, the hiker, the person that's just going to look from the edges and not do anything or go inside or do anything consumptive. They don't want you there. They don't want us there. I'll say us because that's what we're all about.
Yes.
And like the MLPA process, it's insidious. It starts small, but there's a much bigger agenda. And we kind of got fooled and kind of got steamrolled on the MLPA thing when it came around. At first, it was supposed to be a good thing with lots of input from all user groups. Well, that's how they're couching the 30-30 thing, or this latest run that they're making at it. And the fact that Newsom went ahead and put that back on the agenda again when it already had died in committee, that's a bad sign. And there's a lot of money behind it, and they are going to put the grab on more areas unless people get involved with organizations like CCA. And so they have a lobbyist and they have some horsepower to try to fight some of this off. But these are powerful groups that want to take away what we love to do and what your kids will love to do.
Yeah.
And they don't want you catching bass. They don't want you taking fish out of the ocean. They don't want you doing anything consumptive. So that's about the simplest way I can explain it. It's much more detailed than that. What I can say is get involved with CCA.
Yeah, that's
at least get a membership.
The best thing we could do is just help out, involve with CCA. And now, when there's meetings or anything like that, should people be attending like that? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it better to show more numbers of people, like to say, hey, we're all here supporting this. This is what we don't want this to happen. We fish. We do this. Is there something we can do like that as well?
Those numbers are super important. Okay. But what's really important is that CCA generates the dollars to have the lobbyists that can go to Sacramento and fight the issues. So the best thing you can do is get involved with your local CCA chapter, be a member, join at the Fred Hall show or wherever. Go online and look at CCA and look at the good work they're doing. They're doing it all around the country, and it's super grassroots, and their mission is very, very focused. But I would just say get involved and on some level. I mean, if you love to do what we love to do, you better be involved a little bit on that side. It's one of the things I respected so much about Bill Shedd, the Shedd family, and AFTCO was that they knew they had to give back. You know, we make products that allow people to take fish out of the ocean and to consume the resource. So we got to protect the resource.
Yes.
And not just so people can take, but so that it'll be there.
Yeah.
So that it's going to be around. So it's a big deal.
It is, because even when I started fishing, they closed Laguna. It was 2010.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was like I started surf fishing and we lost that. And I was like, shit.
Yeah.
And I read between the lines and I found out you could still fish Crystal Cove, but people thought you couldn't.
Yeah.
So I kind of had that stretch for like about 5 years. No one would fish it. And I'd be like, oh, this is the best.
Yeah.
Because I even got pulled over a couple times. I'm like, I'm fishing a lure jerkbait. Like, it shouldn't be an issue. Like, no, just want to check your license. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
And people would give me shit when I'd walk down the beach and go, you can't fish here. I'm like, yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Because it's Crystal Cove. That's the edge right there is that cliff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. I have a funny Crystal Cove story for you that'll probably be interesting to people. So back in the early days of calico bass fishing, when Benny and I were really getting after it and we were fishing that Crystal Cove, Reef Point, that whole Reef Point's where I caught my biggest fish.
I love Crystal Cove. I do.
So we were fishing that a lot, and we were running down there and we were fishing a lot of Worm Kings. Well, back in the day, Marvin Bendelin at Worm King, he would pour us custom colors. And so we developed this color called 9X1 that was our favorite. It was kind of a black back and a gold middle and a cream colored belly. Mm-hmm. We had a surf smelt color. We had all these different colors we used. Well, we also had some oddballs that nobody else had. They were just like a screw up in the mold or whatever. And so we had Marvin pour us this particular bait that had kind of a purple center and a root beer belly, whatever. And he poured them in like 6 and 7 inch size. Benny and I are fishing Crystal Cove in the springtime. And we're fishing actually Reef Point, which is above Crystal Cove. And we're catching big fish. And we had a couple of those baits. I think like 2 or 3 of them on the boat. One or the other of us hooked a big calico bass, saw the fish at color on that bait. Fish comes off, get the bait back, and the whole back of the bait is gone. Okay. Oh. Now, so the whole back of the plastic's gone. We assume the bass ate it or pulled it in half. No big deal. Don't really think about it. It's not a big thing. A year later, I take my kids down to Crystal Cove. The kids are kicking around through the surf and through the sand and the bundles of kelp and whatever. My son comes running up to me. He's probably 4 or 5 years old at the time. And he's got a half of a swim bait in his hand. He says, "Dad, look at what I found in the kelp." It was that swim bait from a year before in the springtime. It was that same half of a Worm King swim bait. What's the odds of that?
That is so wild.
What are the odds of that?
Were you like, this can't be real?
I was stunned. It was a full Twilight Zone
and
moment.
And you knew it was that bait.
Absolutely.
Just from that color.
There's only one. I mean, it was one of those baits. So
I bet no one believed you at first when you called and told them, no way, get the hell out of here. Yeah,
that's my odd fish story for the day. I think I kept the bait and showed it to Benny later on, and it blew his mind. He didn't believe it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing how, the ocean will give things back like that once in a while.
Do you have, I'm trying to bring this one back, and I used to do it all the time, is a boat owner, your mess up as a boat owner, like something crazy. Like I dropped my boat off the trailer at Dana Point once.
Ouch.
Yeah. You ever done something like that?
I've done everything like that.
What's your most memorable one where you're like, wow, I really screwed up, or wow, I really hurt, or?
Well, I've done a bunch of them. One of them was when I had the Illumaweld boat when it was brand new. So keep in mind that was one of one. That was the very first one they built.
Yes.
And it was 21 feet long, 1/4-inch thick aluminum hull, built like a tank in every possible way. So I had a friend of mine with me that was in the movie business, and he wanted to go albacore fishing. There was albacore like 40 miles below San Diego. Kind of a long story. Mm-hmm. So I told him, I said, okay, Eric, we'll go. We'll take my Illumaweld. The weather's not looking too good, but it's 40 miles. We'll get it. And then my boat's a tank. We'll get it done. So we go down. We catch the albacore. He's got to be back early. Of course, we fish late because the albacore didn't bite till late. So now we're in a time crunch, and he has to be back to the launch ramp. So we beat our way north in, a good hard 20-knot blow. Mm-hmm. We beat our way 40 miles north. And I'm running way harder and way faster and breaking stuff and going crazy to get in on time. So we get in. When I put the boat on the trailer, I see the bilge pumps going off. And I'm like, wow, we really took a lot of water on. Didn't think too much of it. Took the boat home, washed the boat down. Everything's cool. The next weekend, I go to Catalina with a good friend of mine. We're running across the channel on plane. Everything's cool. But every once in a while, the bilge pump's going off. I'm like, well, we're probably taking a little water somewhere. No big deal. We get to Catalina, and I feel like the boat's heavy. It's acting weird. What the hell's going on here? I look in the bilge. The bilge is full of water. We're sinking. We're going under. I'm an inch away from the water coming into the scuppers in the back. Oh, my
God.
So we're trying to figure out what's going on. Well, I had a mask and snorkel on board. I dive over the side. I look at the forefoot of the boat. In other words, the hull right on the keel. I've got a 12-inch long crack in the weld where the aluminum hull meets the keel.
Yes.
A weld had come loose because it didn't have the proper backing on it. We're taking water on. We're going to lose the boat. The boat's brand new. It's like a year old.
Oh, my God.
So I ended up diving over the side with a screwdriver and a shop rag and mashing the shop rag in there. Luckily, the bilge pumps kept up with it. And we were able to run into Avalon, and I went and got some underwater epoxy. I think it was called Glove It. And I remember having to dive in the water and take this underwater epoxy, mix it up, and then smear it on the crack to keep the water from coming in. But it was a good example of pay attention. There's a reason why there's water on the wrong side of the hull. But I almost sunk the boat.
Wow.
Because of that 40-mile run up from San Diego where I had beat the hull in and cracked the hull. Now, the people at Alumweld weren't at fault for that. That was my fault.
You rode the shit out of the thing.
Yeah, and they sent a trailer down the next week, picked the boat up, took it to Oregon, completely redid the bow and sent it back to me. And it was just a deal where they had never built a boat like that and never built it to take those kinds of seas. And it had split along the weld. But I could go on and on with but just this trip, I'm at Isabella, launching the bass boat by myself, and because the water's down, the ramp was a little low, so I got a little carried away and didn't put the boat in as deep as I normally do, and was backing it off the trailer, and the boat kind of hung on the trailer, so I mashed it and went in reverse. Well, one of my transducers, that's my up and down for one of my units, was down low enough that it got in the gravel or in the dirt, and I snapped the transducer off. So I get out on the lake beginning a 4-day fishing stint, and I got no up and down sonar.
Oh, you're pissed.
And this is the third time I've done it. So it was another one of those. I got excited. I should have floated the back of the boat and taken the boat off. But anyway, I got hundreds of stories like that.
It's a good. Do you have in your aluminum boat? Did you run 2 bilge pumps?
I ran 2 bilge pumps in every boat I've ever owned since I had a 13-foot skiff. Yeah,
is that the best piece of advice you give for a boat owner?
The best piece of advice I can give a boat owner is, number one, make sure you have good batteries. Mm-hmm. Batteries don't last forever. If they go about 3 years, you're on borrowed time. Have good bilge pumps and make sure they work.
What kind of batteries do you use?
So right now I'm using AGMs. I'm using Group 31 AGMs in my bass boat.
Optimas or?
No, I'm just using the West Marine brand, which is probably built by Delco or somebody like that.
You don't think Optima's worth the? So I'm on an issue right now asking you. Yeah. I was gonna get Optima. I'm running out of money. My wife's going to kill me if I spend $900 on batteries. So I'm like, I talk to a lot of guys that are like, just go to Sam's Club. They work fine. The Duracells, you get a year warranty, so you can take them back in a year.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I think the Optimas are good. I wouldn't spend the money. I've never spent the money on them. I've always bought the best largest amperage, like a Group 29 or Group 31 if the boat would fit it. But I've been looking a lot at the new NiCad batteries, the super expensive ones, but they're still too expensive.
You think if you spend $2,000-$3,000, say it does last you 7 years, it's almost the same as having those AGMs every.
It's almost there. It's almost there because the AGMs are like $300 a piece.
Okay,
and I think the NiCad batteries are now coming down into the 1,000 to 700 range.
Wow.
So it's getting there.
Yeah.
But having good batteries in the boat and keeping the batteries charged and maintained. That's the number one thing I see people stumble on. That and then fuel now is such a huge issue.
Are you running 91?
No, I'm running 87, but the problem is not the 87 or 91, it's the alcohol. It's the 15% ethanol that's in the fuel.
Are you using a lot of fuel treatment then?
I use Chevron fuel treatment in my boats, yeah.
Every time you fill the tank up?
Every time.
Okay.
But still the Champion, I've got a 200 Mercury on it, an Optimax, and every single year I have to take it back to Anglers Marine to have the fuel system worked on. And even though I treat the fuel, my boats sit for 4 or 5 months.
I wonder if I had 3 injectors go out.
Uh-huh.
You think that could be the issue? I run 91. Maybe I don't run enough fuel treatment.
I don't think you want to run 91. I think you run 87 and put a good fuel treatment in it.
Really?
But the thing that I I would tell you is the longer the boat sits with the ethanol fuel in it, the more chances of it's going to deteriorate your lines and clog your fuel filter, your internal fuel filters up with crap out of the inside of your lines. So the whole fuel thing's a big issue. Batteries are a big issue. And just the basic stuff. Like, I force myself to do a double walk around on the boat when I get to the ramp and when I leave the ramp. Make sure the plug's in, make sure the straps are off, make sure the safety line's off the bow. And then when I leave, make sure I put all that stuff back on. I was leaving Skinner yesterday and I got to the exit shack there where they do the final inspection to make sure you're not carrying quagga mussels around. And I walked the back of the boat. I forgot to put the straps on. So, just little things like that. But if I force myself to walk around the boat, look at the plug, look at the straps, make sure my cell phone's not laying on the bow of the boat like it did last year.
I dropped my cell phone, Skinner. I had to fish it out with the swim bait. Right at the dock, getting off. It fell out of my pocket. I'm like, oh, man.
But some of those things are before I go trailering, when I leave the ramp to go home, because I know it's going to be a gnarly drive home in traffic and everything, I double check that the trailer's hooked on, that it's snapped shut, that the safety pin's in, that both of my safety chains are on. The basic stuff like that. That's the stuff where you screw up, you lose the boat off the trailer. It's those kinds of things that are simple and easy to do that people just get excited and they forget.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, man. Did they make the production model on that boat you made or no?
The aluminum wheel boat?
Yeah.
I don't think they ever went into full production. I know there was 4 or 5 of them around down here. There was other guys that had them. They were super expensive. I mean, it was retail. It was a $50,000 boat, which back in those days, that was a lot of money.
It's a lot of money now.
Yeah. But I mean, for that class
of boat.
I mean, because guys would go, well, I can get a West Coaster, one of those Bay Runner boats, which is basically like a Coors Light can with a motor on it. I can get one of those and they're only $15,000.
Yeah.
Well, the aluminum weld was a whole different league of boat. I mean, you're talking the difference between 50 thousandths thick aluminum in a Bay Runner and 1/4 inch thick aluminum. That's 5 times thicker in the aluminum weld. So, no, I don't think they did great with them down here, but they kill it up in the salmon and
I'm sure.
The freshwater market and the Alaska market and all those
people that run those in the river too with the
jet drives.
Yeah, jet drives.
Yeah.
Right?
And they'll stand it. They'll go over rocks. They'll do all that stuff. So, for a super rugged boat, but they're just like anything, you're gonna pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, man, thanks for coming on the podcast. This is a great one. A lot of information. Feel free to come back if you ever want to come. Maybe I get you and Ben on, and you guys could talk about the whole DVD together.
Yeah, we could do that.
That'd
Absolutely.
be great. And anywhere they could see you at, just Instagram or Facebook. Are you on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook a little bit, Nick, but I'm not on Instagram that much, and I'm just not a big social media guy. I kind of do what I do quietly now, and I'm just busy going from one trip to the next and trying to figure out what to catch or kill.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Greg. I appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome, Nick. Pleasure.